In 2019, Hong Kong was rocked by pro-democracy mass protests. Now, many months on, the city is transformed, and not in the way protesters have hoped. The Chinese government has clamped down hard, putting in place restrictive rules and reforming the way Hong Kong is run. There's a stringent national security law that criminalizes anything that Beijing considers as subversion or collusion with foreign forces. Scores have been arrested under the law for doing things like chanting certain slogans, waving this flag, or organizing unofficial election primaries. Those arrested include pro-democracy activists and politicians who face long jail sentences. China's also changed the way Hong Kong elects its local parliament, the Legislative Council. It wants patriots to govern the city, and anyone who wants to run will be screened beforehand. So it's easier to bar anyone seen as critical of Beijing. MPs who are directly elected by the people will also have less power. But why is the Chinese government so intent on crushing dissent in Hong Kong? To understand this, we have to go back in time. Hong Kong used to be a British colony, and in 1997, the city was handed back to China. Britain and China struck a deal. For the next 50 years, Hong Kong could mostly govern itself and have rights unlike anywhere else on the mainland, such as freedom of speech and some form of democratic elections. This concept was called One Country, Two Systems. But as time went on, there was growing suspicion that the Chinese government was interfering more with Hong Kong in areas like education, the press, and local elections. This exploded in mass protests in 2019 over a proposed extradition law that many feared would make Hong Kong's courts less independent. It turned violent. Meanwhile, support grew for pro-democracy politicians who swept local elections that year. All of this did not go down well with the Chinese government. It has blamed anti-China forces in Hong Kong for colluding with foreign forces.
必须采取有力措施，依法予以防范、制止和惩治。
But China denies it's stifling Hong Kong's rights.
没有谁比中央政府更关心香港民主的发展，更希望香港保持繁荣稳定。
But there may be deeper reasons for this tension. Firstly, it's the question of identity and how it's evolved in the decades the two have spent apart. It's the difference between a liberal Hong Kong with democratic values and the Chinese Communist government.
The independent press, free speech, you can go to the street and protest, you can yell down with Xi Jinping. These are the values the Hong Kong people grew up with. So when people are defending something from being taken away, there's this very volatile reaction. Hong Kong people really asking for what's been promised them. Essentially, stick to the one country, two systems model.
It's also got to do with how the Chinese government prizes national unity.
Beijing has become more insistent, perhaps strident, on this idea of oneness, on this idea that anything that smells like what it believes is separatism is unacceptable. Based on this belief that they have that China's weakness owed to its division, and this allowed China to be, in their retelling of history, bullied, invaded, taken advantage of by others. And so it's putting more pressure on Hong Kong. But we see that pressure in Xinjiang, we see that pressure in Taiwan, we see that pressure in the South China Sea. So it's part of an overall momentum that we see in Beijing that is not going away anytime soon.
So what does this mean for Hong Kong's future?
the PRC has so much more resources at its disposal, it will probably try to force Hong Kong to bend to its will. People in Hong Kong will be uncomfortable with it. They will dislike it. Those people who can may wish to move away. Those who can't may try to resist, possibly at great personal cost to themselves.
People have to have some kind of optimism to continue. So it may seem naive, but there's always light at the end of the tunnel, and so people are insisting on that. Just resisting the new normal, just insisting on living life as before is everyday form of resistance.